Standing at my father's funeral, listening to my brother Marcus deliver his eulogy, I never expected to hear the words that would shatter our family forever. The truth is, if Rachel hadn't been so selfish, Dad would still be alive today. His voice carried across the packed funeral home, and I felt every pair of eyes turn toward me in the back row where I'd been quietly grieving. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My hands trembled as I gripped the funeral program, the same program I'd spent 3 sleepless nights designing, filled with photos I'd carefully selected from our family albums. The irony wasn't lost on me that the very person who couldn't be bothered to help with any of the funeral arrangements was now using this sacred moment to publicly crucify me. But what Marcus didn't know was that our father's lawyer was sitting 2 rows behind him, holding documents that would expose the real truth about Dad's final months. I'm Rachel, 34 years old, and until 5 days ago, I thought I understood my place in our family dynamic. I was the responsible one, the one who moved back home when Dad was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's 2 years ago. While Marcus continued his life in Chicago, climbing the corporate ladder at his investment firm, I put my own career as a pediatric nurse on hold to become Dad's full-time caregiver. I never asked for recognition or gratitude. Taking care of Dad wasn't a burden. It was a privilege. But I also never expected to be painted as the villain in my own father's story. The Riverside funeral home was filled to capacity that gray Tuesday morning. Dad had been a beloved high school principal for 30 years, and it seemed like every student he'd ever taught had come to pay their respects. The atmosphere was heavy with grief and the subtle scent of lilies, Dad's favorite flowers, though Marcus probably didn't know that. He hadn't been home for more than a weekend in the past 18 months. I had arrived early that morning, making sure everything was perfect. The photo collage I'd created stood on an easel near the casket, chronicling Dad's life from his childhood on the farm to his last coherent Christmas with us. The flowers were arranged exactly as he would have liked. Them, simple, elegant, nothing too showy. Even the music playlist was carefully curated with his favorite hymns and the jazz standards he used to play while grading papers in his study. Marcus had flown in the night before, and we'd barely exchanged 10 words. He looked older than his 38 years, his tailored suit hanging differently on his frame, probably from too many client dinners and not enough home-cooked meals. When I'd tried to brief him on the funeral arrangements, he'd waved me off, saying he had his eulogy under control and didn't need my help. The distance between us had grown into a chasm over the past 2 years, but I'd hoped that in our shared grief, we might find our way back to being siblings again. The service began with Pastor Williams offering a beautiful opening prayer. Dad's best friend Harold shared touching stories about their fishing trips and poker nights. Our cousin Lisa read a poem that had everyone reaching for their tissues. Everything was going according to the program, until Marcus stepped up to the podium. He started conventionally enough, talking about Dad's dedication to education and his impact on the community. He shared a few childhood memories that even brought a slight smile to my face. But then, about 5 minutes into his speech, his tone shifted. His jaw tightened, and his knuckles whitened as he gripped the edges of the podium. However, Marcus said, his voice taking on an edge that made my stomach drop, I would be doing a disservice to my father's memory if I didn't address the circumstances that led us here today. He paused, scanning the crowd before his eyes landed on me. Many of you may not know this, but my father's decline was rapid and, I believe, unnecessarily traumatic. I felt my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, stiffen beside me. She had been one of the many community members who'd helped during Dad's illness, bringing over casseroles and sitting with him when I needed to run errands. She knew exactly how hard I'd worked to keep Dad comfortable and dignified as the disease progressed. My sister Rachel, Marcus continued, practically spitting my name, made the unilateral decision to keep our father at home instead of placing him in a proper care facility where he could have received professional medical attention. Despite my repeated suggestions and offers to pay for the best nursing home in the state, she insisted on playing nurse herself. The whispers started then, rippling through the crowd like wind through wheat. I wanted to stand up, to defend myself, but my legs felt like lead. How could he do this? How could he use Dad's funeral as a platform for his grievances? 2 months ago, Marcus went on, his voice growing louder. Dad fell in the shower while Rachel was supposedly watching him. That fall led to a hip fracture, which led to pneumonia, which ultimately led to his death. If he had been in a professional facility with round-the-clock care, this tragedy could have been prevented. The blood drained from my face. Yes, Dad had fallen, but it wasn't due to negligence. He'd insisted on showering independently that morning as he did on his more lucid days. I'd been right outside the door, and I'd gotten to him within seconds. The doctors had assured me that falls were common with Alzheimer's patients, regardless of the setting. But Marcus was twisting the narrative, making it sound like I'd abandoned Dad to fend for himself. Furthermore, Marcus continued, seemingly emboldened by the shocked reactions he was getting, I've recently discovered some concerning details about our father's finances. It seems that in his final year, there were significant withdrawals from his accounts, withdrawals that coincidentally align with improvements to Rachel's house and a mysterious new car in her driveway. This accusation hit me like a physical blow. Yes, there had been withdrawals, but they were for Dad's care, medical equipment, medications not covered by insurance, home modifications to make the house safer for him. The improvements to my house were actually a wheelchair ramp, grab bars in the bathroom, and a stair lift. The mysterious new car was a used van with a wheelchair lift that I'd bought after Dad's mobility decreased. Every penny had been spent on his care, and I had receipts for everything. I believe, Marcus declared, his voice ringing with self-righteous conviction, that my sister took advantage of our father's diminished capacity for her own financial gain, and her negligence, whether intentional or not, directly contributed to his premature death. I think we all deserve answers. The funeral home erupted in chaos. Some people gasped, others began whispering frantically. I saw judgment in some eyes, pity in others. My face burned with humiliation and rage. How dare he turn Dad's funeral into a public trial? That's when I noticed Mr. Morrison, Dad's lawyer, rising from his seat. He was a distinguished man in his 70s, someone Dad had known since their college days. He cleared his throat loudly, and the room gradually quieted. Marcus, Mr. Morrison said, his voice steady but firm. I think this is neither the time nor the place for such accusations. However, since you've chosen to make these claims publicly, I feel compelled to address them. Marcus looked stunned. He clearly hadn't expected anyone to challenge him, least of all Dad's lawyer. Your father, Mr. Morrison continued, was of sound mind when he made his final arrangements. He specifically chose to remain at home under Rachel's care. In fact, he amended his living will just last year to explicitly state that he did not want to be placed in a nursing facility under any circumstances. The room was dead silent now. Marcus's face had gone from righteous indignation to confusion. As for the financial allegations, Mr. Morrison pulled a document from his briefcase. I have here a detailed accounting of every transaction from your father's accounts over the past 2 years. Every withdrawal was authorized by your father, while he was still legally competent, or by Rachel acting under power of attorney for legitimate medical and care expenses. Your father reviewed these expenses with me quarterly until he was no longer able. I watched as the color drained from Marcus's face. He opened his mouth to speak, but Mr. Morrison wasn't finished. Us. Angela's voice rose. We're getting married in 6 months. No, Marcus corrected. We're not. I called it off 3 weeks ago, remember? You said you needed time to process, but we both know it's been over for months. I busied myself. In the kitchen, trying not to eavesdrop but unable to avoid hearing their conversation in the small house. Is this about her? Angela's voice dripped with disdain. Your sister who couldn't even bother to get a real job? The old me might have shrunk from such words, but the woman who'd spent 2 years advocating for her father's dignity found. Her spine was made of steel. I walked back into the foyer. Angela, I think you should leave. This is a house of mourning, and you're not family. She turned on me, eyes flashing. Not family? I've been with Marcus for 3 years. And in those 3 years, I said evenly, you never once visited my father, never sent a card, never asked how we were managing. So no, you're not family. Family shows up. Marcus stepped beside me, a united front. She's right, Angela. Please go. After she left, slamming the door behind her, Marcus slumped against the wall. I'm sorry you had to deal with that. I'm not, I said honestly. It felt good to stand up for myself. For us. When did you get so strong? He asked with genuine admiration. Somewhere between the first time Dad forgot my name and the last time he remembered it, I answered. Strength isn't something you have. It's something you build, one hard day at a time. The next morning, we visited the bank together. The safety deposit box revealed exactly what Dad's letter had promised, plus a surprise, a collection of every birthday card, school report, and childhood drawing we'd ever given him, meticulously preserved. He kept everything, Marcus marveled, holding up a crayon drawing of our family I'd made in 2nd grade. Among the papers, we found a more recent document, a letter dated just 6 months ago during one of Dad's lucid periods. To my children, if you're reading this together, then my greatest wish has been fulfilled. You've found your way back. To each other. The inheritance I leave you isn't just financial. It's the gift of shared history, of inside jokes, of someone who knew you before you knew yourself. Money divides families. Love multiplies them. Choose multiplication. Your devoted father. The storage unit, which we visited that afternoon, was a treasure trove of memories. Our childhood bikes, Marcus's baseball trophies, my art projects, Mom's wedding dress, boxes of family photos spanning generations. He saved it all, Marcus said, running his hand over his old baseball glove. Even when I said I didn't want any of this stuff, he saved it. For your future children, I reminded him. He was thinking ahead even then. We spent hours going through boxes, rediscovering our shared past. Each item sparked a memory, a story, a connection. By evening, we'd laughed more than we'd cried, a calm shift that felt significant. That night, we ordered pizza and sat surrounded by boxes of memories. Marcus had found Dad's old record player and put on some jazz. The familiar sounds filled the house, making it feel less empty. I've been thinking, Marcus said, picking pepperoni off his slice like he'd done since childhood, about what you said, that strength is something you build one hard day at a time. I want to build something too, not just strength, but a life that would make Dad proud. What kind of life? I asked. One where I show up, where I choose people over profits, where I don't run from hard things. He paused. I put an offer on the Steadman place today. I nearly choked on my pizza. The house on Maple Street? But that's 3 blocks from here, he finished. I know. I figured if I'm going to learn how to be present, I should start by actually being present. What about your job transfer? He grinned. Turns out they're happy to let me work. Remotely most days. I'll commute to the city twice a week. The rest of the time I'll be here. Learning to be part of this community again. Maybe even volunteering at the senior center. I felt something shift inside me, a loosening of the protective walls I'd built. Marcus, you don't have to do this out of guilt. I'm not, he assured me. I'm doing it out of love and hope, and the radical idea that it's not too late to become the person I want to be. Over the next week, we fell into a rhythm. Mornings were for practical matters, estate paperwork, house maintenance, returning Dad's library books. Afternoons were for memory exploration, going through photos, visiting Dad's favorite spots, talking to his friends. Evenings were for us, cooking dinner together, sharing stories, slowly rebuilding our sibling bond. The town watched our reconciliation with interest. Some people remained skeptical of Marcus's transformation, but most seemed willing to embrace the prodigal son's return. He made amends where he could, acknowledging his absence and his accusations at the funeral. I was wrong, he told anyone who would listen. My sister is the real hero of our family story. But I was learning too, learning to accept help, to share the burden of grief, to imagine a future beyond caregiving. Sarah from hospice had been right. I needed to rediscover who I was. 2 weeks after the funeral, I submitted my application to 3 nurse practitioner programs. Marcus helped me write my personal statement, drawing on our recent experiences to articulate my passion for elder care. You're going to revolutionize the field, he said confidently. You have both the clinical knowledge and the lived experience. We'll see, I hedged, but hope was blooming in my chest. The day Marcus's 2-week stay officially ended, he didn't leave. Instead, he took me to see the Stedman house, which he'd just closed on. I want your input on the renovation, he said, leading me through the empty rooms, especially the guest suite. I want it to be perfect for when you visit during school breaks. Assuming I get in somewhere, I reminded him. When you get in, he corrected. And this house will always be your home base, no matter where you land. Standing in what would become his living room, looking out at the familiar neighborhood, where we'd ridden bikes and played hide-and-seek, I felt the last of my resentment dissolve. Dad would love this, I said softly. Yeah, Marcus agreed. He would. That evening, we drove to the cemetery together. The ground was still fresh. Over Dad's grave, but someone had already planted bulbs around the headstone, probably Mrs. Patterson and her garden club. Marcus pulled out his box of unsent letters. Ready? We took turns reading them aloud. Years of updates, apologies, achievements, and fears that Dad never got to hear. Our voices carried across the quiet cemetery, and somehow it felt like he was listening. When we finished, the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. We stood in comfortable silence, 2 siblings who had found their way back to each other through loss. Thank you, Marcus said suddenly. For what? For keeping the light on, for not giving up on me, for showing me what love looks like in action. I leaned against my brother's shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of family rediscovered. That's what siblings do. We show up for each other, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. A month later, I received acceptance letters from all 3 programs I'd applied to. Marcus insisted on throwing a celebration dinner, inviting all the people who'd supported us through Dad's illness. The house filled with laughter and congratulations, feeling alive again. As I looked around the room, at Harold telling stories about Dad, at Mrs. Patterson critiquing Marcus's cooking, at Sarah from hospice hugging me proudly, I realized something profound. In losing Dad, I hadn't just gained back my brother. I'd discovered a whole community of family. Marcus raised his glass for a toast to Rachel, who taught me that sometimes the greatest strength is in staying. And to Dad, who knew that love isn't diminished by distance or disease. It's multiplied by every act of showing up. To showing up, everyone echoed. And in that moment, I knew that despite everything, Or maybe because of everything, we were going to be okay. Different, certainly. Scarred, definitely. But stronger, together, and finally home. 6 months had passed since Dad's funeral, and life had taken on a rhythm I never could have predicted. I was deep into my first semester at Boston University's nurse practitioner program, living in a small apartment near campus. The city was overwhelming at first, so different from our quiet town. But I was discovering parts of myself that had been dormant during my caregiving years. Marcus had kept his promise. His house renovation was complete, and he'd transformed the Stedman place into a warm, welcoming home. More surprisingly, he'd become a pillar of the community, volunteering at the senior center 3 days a week and serving on the board of the local hospice organization. We video called every Sunday night, a ritual that had become sacred to both of us. It was during one of these calls that Marcus dropped his bombshell. "So, I've been seeing someone," he said casually, as if discussing the weather. I nearly dropped my laptop. "What? Who? When? Why didn't you tell me?" He laughed, a sound that still felt new and precious after years of strained silence. "Her name's Elena. She's the new social worker at the senior center. We've been dating for about 2 months. 2 months? Marcus." I wanted to make sure. "It was real before I said anything," he explained. "After the disaster with Angela, I'm trying to do things differently. Take it slow, build something genuine." As he talked about Elena, her compassion, her dedication to elder care, her wicked sense of humor, I heard something in his voice I'd never heard when he spoke about Angela. Authenticity. This wasn't about status or image. This was about connection. "When do I get to meet her?" I asked. "Actually, that's partly why I'm calling. Remember that tomorrow is the anniversary of Dad's death?" My stomach tightened. Of course I remembered. I'd been dreading it for weeks. "I'm organizing a memorial gathering at the house," Marcus continued. "Nothing formal, just people who loved Dad sharing memories. Elena's helping me cook. Will you come home for it?" Home. The word hit me with unexpected force. Boston was where I lived now, but home. Home was still where Dad's memory lived, where Marcus was rebuilding our family legacy. "I'll be there," I promised. The bus ride back to town gave me time to reflect on how much had changed. A year ago, I'd been consumed by the daily challenges of Dad's care. Now I was studying advanced pathophysiology and pharmacology, using my caregiving experience to inform my academic work. My professors often commented on my unique perspective, how I understood the human element of healthcare in ways that couldn't be taught from textbooks. Marcus met me at the bus station, and I was struck again by his transformation. The corporate shark had been replaced by someone softer, more present. He wore jeans and Dad's old college sweatshirt, his designer watches, replaced by a simple timepiece that had belonged to our grandfather. "You look good," I said, meaning it. "You look happy," he replied. "Boston suits you." At his house, I met Elena, a petite woman with kind eyes and an infectious laugh. Within minutes, I understood why Marcus was drawn to her. She had a way of making everyone feel seen and valued, much like Dad had. "Rachel!" she exclaimed, pulling me into a warm hug. "I've heard so much about you. Marcus talks about you constantly." "All good things, I hope." "The best things," she assured me. "Your strength through your father's illness, your dedication to your studies, your willingness to forgive. You're kind of his hero." I glanced at Marcus, who actually blushed. This humble version of my brother was still taking some getting used to. The memorial gathering was perfect in its simplicity. About 30 people came, Dad's colleagues, former students, neighbors, friends. Marcus had set up displays of photos and memorabilia, and Elena had prepared Dad's favorite foods. But the centerpiece was something unexpected, a scholarship fund Marcus had established in Dad's name. The Robert Morrison Education Fund, he announced to the gathered group, will provide annual support to local students pursuing careers in education or healthcare. Dad believed in investing in people, in second chances, in the power of showing up for your community. This fund will ensure his legacy continues. Harold Jameson caught my eye across the room and nodded approvingly. Later, he pulled me aside. Your brother's becoming quite the man, he observed. More like your father every day. It's strange, I admitted. Sometimes I look at him and see glimpses of who he might have been if we hadn't lost our way. People aren't lost, Harold said wisely. They're just taking different routes to the same destination. You and Marcus needed to travel apart for a while to appreciate the journey back together. As the evening progressed, people shared stories about Dad. Some I'd heard before, many I hadn't. Marcus told one that surprised everyone. When I was 16, he began, I got arrested for shoplifting, stupid teenage stuff, trying to impress the wrong crowd. Dad came to the police station, but instead of bailing me out immediately, he let me sit in that cell for 3 hours. The room was silent, captivated. When he finally came back, I expected fury. Instead, he sat down outside my cell and said, Marcus, I'm not angry. I'm curious. What's missing in your life that you're trying to fill by taking things that aren't yours? Marcus's voice wavered slightly. We talked for 2 hours about belonging, about identity, about the difference between fitting in and being authentic. That conversation changed my life trajectory. And now I realize, I spent 20 years after that still trying to fill some void with achievements and acquisitions instead of connections and service. Elena reached for his hand, and I saw her squeeze it supportively. Dad's Alzheimer's took a lot from us, Marcus continued, but it also gave us something precious, perspective. It stripped away the artificial and left only what truly mattered: love, presence, family. After the guests left, Marcus, Elena, and I sat in his living room, going through condolence cards we'd never opened. Among them, we found a letter that changed everything. It was from a woman named Grace Whitmore, postmarked from California. Dear Morrison family, you don't know me, but your father saved my life 35 years ago. I was a troubled teenager who everyone had given up on, except Robert Morrison. He was my high school counselor, the only adult who saw potential in me when I saw none in myself. I've followed his career from afar, always meaning to reach out and thank him. I deeply regret waiting too long. But I want you to know that I'm now a successful psychiatrist specializing in adolescent trauma, and I owe it all to your father's faith in me. I've enclosed a check for $50,000 to be used however you see fit to honor his memory. It's a small repayment for the investment he made in my life. With gratitude, Dr. Grace Whitmore. We sat in stunned silence until Elena whispered, $50,000? The scholarship fund, I said immediately. It has to go to the scholarship fund. Marcus nodded. Agreed. But this letter, how many other lives did Dad touch that we don't even know about? The question hung in the air, heavy with possibility. How do you measure a life's impact? Not in dollars or achievements, but in the ripples of kindness that continue long after someone is gone. That night, unable to sleep in my old room, now Marcus's guest suite, I found myself in Dad's study, the one room Marcus had kept exactly as it was. His books still lined the shelves, his reading glasses still sat on the desk. I picked up a leather journal I'd never seen before. Opening it, I discovered it was Dad's diary from the early days of his diagnosis. The entries were heartbreaking, in their clarity. Today, I forgot Rachel's name for 10 seconds. 10 seconds that felt like eternity. I covered it well, but I saw the flash of pain in her eyes. How do I prepare my children for losing me piece by piece? Another entry. Marcus called today. Brief conversation about work. I wanted to tell him I'm scared, that I need him. But the words wouldn't come. Pride or protection. Maybe both. I hope he forgives me for not being braver. And then, the entry that broke me. Rachel made pot roast tonight. Margaret's recipe. For a moment, the taste transported me back 40 years and everything was clear. These moments of grace amidst the fog are worth every struggle. If I could tell my children one thing, it would be this. The love remains even when the memories fade. I was sobbing when Marcus found me an hour later. "Can't sleep either?" he asked, then saw the journal in my hands. "Oh, you found that. You knew about this?" He nodded, sitting beside me on the floor. "Found it last month when I was organizing. I've been reading a few pages at a time. It's intense. Furthermore, your father left a letter to be read in the event that any family disputes arose after his passing. Given the circumstances, I believe now would be an appropriate time to share its contents." Mr. Morrison unfolded a piece of paper. Dad's personal stationery that I recognized immediately. His hands were steady as he began to read. "To my beloved children, Marcus and Rachel, if this letter is being read, it means I am gone and there is conflict between you. This breaks my heart, more than my own passing ever could. I write this while I still have moments of clarity, knowing that my time is limited. Marcus, my son, I know you've felt guilty about living far away during my illness. Please don't. You were living the life I always wanted for you. Successful, independent, making your mark on the world. I have been nothing but proud. Rachel, my daughter, you sacrificed more than anyone should have to care for me. You put your life on hold, gave up job opportunities, and spent countless sleepless nights by my side. You did this not for money or recognition, but out of love. Every withdrawal from my account was discussed with and approved by me. The home modifications, the medical equipment, the van, all necessary for my care and comfort. Marcus, if you are harboring resentment toward your sister, please let it go. She gave me the gift of dying in my own home, surrounded by familiar things and love. She honored my wishes even when it would have been easier for her to place me in a facility. To both of you, I leave this world loving you equally, but knowing you differently. Marcus, you show love through provision and problem solving. Rachel, you show love through presence and sacrifice. Neither is wrong. Both are needed. Please don't let my death divide you. You are all each other has now. With all my love, Dad." The silence in the room was absolute. I watched Marcus's face crumple as the weight of Dad's words hit him. His shoulders began to shake, and for the first time since we were children, I saw my brother cry. Mr. Morrison folded the letter carefully and returned to his seat. Pastor Williams, bless him, stepped forward and suggested we take a moment for silent reflection before continuing with the service. But the damage was done. The funeral I had so carefully planned had been derailed by accusations and family drama, exactly what Dad would have hated. As people shifted uncomfortably in their seats, I finally found the strength to stand. Every eye in the room turned to me as I made my way to the aisle. I didn't go to the podium. This wasn't about making a grand speech or defending myself. Instead, I walked to Marcus, who was still standing there, looking lost and broken. "We need to talk," I said quietly. "But not here, not now. This is about Dad." Marcus nodded, unable to meet my eyes. He returned to his seat, and somehow, we made it through the rest of the service. The burial was a blur of condolences and awkward glances. People didn't know what to say to either of us. It wasn't until everyone had left the cemetery that Marcus approached me. We stood there among the headstones, the February wind cutting through our black coats. "Rachel, he started, but I held up my hand. "Not here," I repeated. "Come to the house. We'll talk there." The drive back to Dad's house, I still couldn't think of it as just mine, was surreal. This was supposed to be a day of mourning and celebration of Dad's life, not a public airing of family grievances. I thought about all the things I wanted to say to Marcus, all the hurt and anger bubbling inside me. But I also remembered Dad's letter. He wouldn't want us to tear each other apart over his grave. When we arrived at the house, Marcus hesitated at the door. "I don't know if I should—" "Just come in," I said wearily. "I'll make coffee." The house felt different now, emptier. Dad's presence had filled every corner, even in his final months when he barely knew where he was. His reading glasses still sat on the side table. His cardigan was still draped over his favorite chair. I hadn't had the heart to move anything yet. As I busied myself in the kitchen, I heard Marcus moving through the living room. When I came out with 2 mugs of coffee, I found him studying the modifications I'd made to the house. The wider doorways, the support rails, the medical equipment that I hadn't yet returned. "I didn't know," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I mean, I knew you'd made some changes, but I didn't realize the extent of it. This must have cost—" "Every penny was worth it," I cut in. Dad was comfortable here. He had dignity here. On his good days, he could still navigate his own home. Marcus sank onto the couch, cradling his coffee mug like a lifeline. "I convinced myself you were being stubborn, that you were trying to prove something by keeping him here. I thought you were being selfish." "Selfish?" The word tasted bitter. "Marcus, I gave up everything to care for Dad. My job, my social life, any chance at a relationship. I haven't had a full night's sleep in 2 years. How is that selfish?" "I know that now," he said miserably. I think I was the selfish one. It was easier to send money and criticize from afar than to actually be here, to see him decline day by day. I couldn't handle watching him disappear, so I convinced myself that you were doing it wrong." The admission hung between us, heavy with truth. I sat down across from him, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline from the funeral confrontation was wearing off, leaving only bone-deep weariness. "Why didn't you call me?" I asked. "If you had concerns about the money, about Dad's care, why didn't you talk to me instead of ambushing me at his funeral?" Marcus ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of Dad that it made my chest ache. "I got a call from Aunt Susan last month. She mentioned the fall, said she was worried about you handling everything alone. Then when I looked into Dad's accounts—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "I should have called. I should have visited more. I should have done a lot of things differently." "Yes, you should have," I agreed, not feeling particularly forgiving. Yet. "Do you have any idea what it was like? Not just the physical care, but watching him fade away? There were days when he didn't know who I was, when he thought I was Mom. There were nights when he would wake up screaming, terrified and confused. And through all of it, I was alone." "You weren't supposed to be," Marcus said, his voice cracking. "We were supposed to do this together. That's what families do." "Then where were you?" The question burst out of me, years of resentment finally finding voice. Where were you when he needed bathing, when he needed feeding, when he cried for hours because he couldn't remember his own name? Where were you when I had to make the decision to start hospice care? Marcus flinched at each question. "I was hiding," he admitted. "I was hiding behind my job, my distance, my denial. I kept telling myself that next month I'd visit, next holiday I'd stay longer. I thought we had more time." "We never have as much time as we think," I said, echoing something Dad used to say. We sat in silence for a while, drinking our coffee, surrounded by the ghosts of our shared past. The afternoon light was fading, casting long shadows across the room. "What happened to us, Rach?" Marcus asked finally. "We used to be close. Remember when we were kids, how we'd build forts in the backyard and pretend we were explorers? I smiled slightly at the memory. You always insisted on being the captain. And you always outsmarted the imaginary pirates, he replied. When did we stop being a team? I think it started when you left for college, I said thoughtfully. You were so eager to get out of this small town, to make something of yourself, and I was proud of you. I really was. But somewhere along the way, you started seeing home as something to escape from rather than something to return to. Marcus nodded slowly. And you stayed. You went to nursing school nearby, got a job at the local hospital. I thought you were settling, limiting yourself. I didn't understand that you were choosing to stay close to family. We wanted different things, I acknowledged. But that shouldn't have meant losing each other. No, it shouldn't have. Marcus set down his mug and looked at me directly for the first time since the funeral. I'm sorry, Rachel. Not just for today, but for everything. For not being here, for judging your choices, for making assumptions instead of asking questions. I'm sorry for failing you and Dad when you needed me most. The apology hung in the air between us, heavy and raw. Thank you for not giving up on me, for keeping the light on. I reached over to touch my niece's tiny hand, marveling at how life continues to unfold in unexpected ways. That's what family does, I said. We show up for each other, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Above us, stars emerged in the darkening sky, countless points of light, each one a story, a memory, a legacy shining across the vastness of time and space. And I knew, with certainty that went beyond faith, that Dad was up there somewhere, watching his masterpiece unfold. Two broken children who found their way home to each other, carrying forward the only inheritance that truly matters. The capacity to love, the courage to forgive, the wisdom to know that sometimes our greatest losses become our most profound gifts, and the understanding that in the end, showing up is everything. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us. I studied my brother's face, seeing for the first time how grief had aged him, how guilt had carved lines around his eyes. Part of me wanted to immediately embrace him, but 2 years of accumulated hurt couldn't dissolve that quickly. I need you to understand something, I said, setting down my coffee cup with deliberate care. When Dad first got his diagnosis, I called you 17 times in 3 days. I left voicemails, sent texts, even emailed your work address. Do you remember what you said when you finally called back? Marcus winced. I said I was in the middle of a major merger. You said you'd look into facilities and send money. For whatever Dad needed, I continued. As if that was the solution. Throw money at it and make it go away. But Alzheimer's doesn't work like that. It's not a problem you can solve with a checkbook. I know that now, he said quietly. Do you? I challenged. Because even today, at his funeral, you made it sound like putting Dad in a nursing home would have saved him. Like his death was my fault because I honored his wishes to stay home. Marcus slumped deeper into the couch. I was angry. At myself, mostly. But it was easier to direct it at you. When Aunt Susan called about Dad's fall, I saw an opportunity to finally point fingers at someone else instead of looking in the mirror. The winter sun was setting now, casting the living room in a golden glow that highlighted all the medical equipment I'd tried to make blend in with the decor. The hospital bed in the corner, disguised with a handmade quilt, the oxygen tank tucked behind a decorative screen, the wheelchair folded discreetly by the door. You want to know what a typical day was like? I asked, not waiting for his response. I'd wake up at 5 a.m. to check if Dad needed changing. Then I'd make breakfast, something soft because he had trouble swallowing. While he ate, I'd crush his medications into applesauce because pills became impossible. Then we'd do his exercises, physical therapy to maintain whatever mobility we could. Marcus listened silently, his coffee growing cold in his hands. By 10 a.m., if it was a good day, he might remember who I was. We'd look through photo albums and I'd tell him stories about Mom, about us as kids. On bad days, he'd be agitated, sometimes violent. He once threw a lamp at me because he thought I was an intruder. Hit me right here. I pointed to a small scar above my eyebrow. 7 stitches. Jesus, Rachel, I didn't know. Of course, you didn't, I cut him off. Because you weren't here, and every time I tried to tell you how bad it was getting, you'd say you were busy with work, that you'd visit next month. I was scared, Marcus admitted, his voice barely audible. Every time I thought about coming home, I'd remember Dad as he was, strong, brilliant, the man who taught me to ride a bike and helped me with calculus. I couldn't bear to see him. Diminished? I supplied. Neither could I. But I watched. It happened anyway, day by day, because someone had to be here. Someone had to make sure he took his medications, ate his meals, didn't wander into the street in his pajamas thinking it was 1975. I stood up and walked to the mantel, where a photo of the 3 of us, Dad, Marcus, and me, sat in a silver frame. It was taken at Marcus's college graduation, all of us beaming with pride. Do you remember what Dad said in his speech at your graduation party? I asked. Marcus smiled faintly. He said his greatest accomplishment wasn't his career or awards, but raising 2 kids who would always take care of each other. Funny. How that worked out, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. I failed him, Marcus said. I failed both of you. Yes, you did. I turned to face him. But what hurts most isn't that you weren't here for the hard parts. It's that you showed up at the end and tried to rewrite the narrative. You made me the villain in front of everyone who mattered to Dad, everyone who'd watched me care for him these past 2 years. I'll fix it, Marcus said urgently. I'll tell everyone the truth. Apologize publicly. You can't unring that bell, I interrupted. Half those people left the funeral thinking I'm either negligent or a thief. Do you have any idea what that feels like? To have your reputation destroyed at your father's funeral? The doorbell rang, startling us both. I wasn't expecting anyone, but grief brought visitors at odd hours. When I opened the door, I found Harold Jameson, Dad's best friend, standing on the porch with a casserole dish. I hope I'm not intruding, Harold said, his kind eyes taking in my tear-stained face. Martha insisted I bring this over. She said you probably haven't eaten all day. Thank you, Harold. Would you like to come in? He hesitated, glancing past me to where Marcus sat. Actually, I was hoping to speak with both of you if that's all right. I stepped aside to let him in. Harold had been like an uncle to us growing up, spending countless weekends fishing with Dad or helping with house projects. He settled into Dad's armchair, something I noticed with a pang, and fixed us both with a steady gaze. I've known your family for 40 years, he began. I watched you both grow up. I was there when your mother passed, and I've been here through your father's illness, so I feel I've earned the right to speak plainly. We both nodded, chastened like children. Marcus, what you did today was shameful, Harold said bluntly. Your father would have been appalled. But Rachel, your silence in response concerns me too. I blinked in surprise. What was I supposed to do? Start an argument at Dad's funeral? No, Harold agreed. But this rift between you two has been festering for years. Your father saw it, worried about it. He made me promise to try to help you reconcile if something happened to him. Dad talked to you about us? Marcus asked. Often. He understood why you stayed away, Marcus, even if it hurt him. He knew facing his decline terrified you because you'd already watched your mother waste away from cancer. But he also saw how it was wearing on Rachel, being the sole caregiver. I felt tears welling up again. He never said anything to me about being a burden. Because he was grateful beyond words for your sacrifice, Harold said gently. But he worried about what would happen to both of you after he was gone. He didn't want his death to be the thing that finally severed your relationship completely. It won't be, Marcus said firmly. I won't let it. Harold leaned forward. Words are easy, son. What matters now is action. Your sister has spent 2 years showing up every single day. Now it's your turn. But Dad's gone, Marcus said, confused. How do I show up now? By helping clean out the medical equipment, by sorting through his belongings together, by being present for your sister as she grieves, Harold suggested, by rebuilding the trust you broke. The doorbell rang again, and this time it was Mrs. Patterson from next door, followed by 3 other neighbors, all carrying food. Word had spread about the funeral drama, and our community was responding the way small towns do, with casseroles and quiet support. We wanted you to know, Mrs. Patterson said, squeezing my hand, that those of us who saw you with your father every day know the truth. You were a devoted daughter, and he was lucky to have you. As more people arrived, the mail carrier who'd chatted with Dad daily, the grocery store clerk who'd helped me with shopping, the pharmacist who'd rushed emergency prescriptions, I realized something profound. While I'd felt alone in my caregiving, I'd actually been surrounded by a network of people who'd witnessed my dedication firsthand. Marcus watched this parade of support with growing awareness. These were people he didn't know, relationships I'd built while he was absent. They spoke of small moments, how I'd decorated Dad's wheelchair for the 4th of July parade, how I'd brought him to the park on sunny days, how I'd made sure he could still attend church until it became impossible. After the last neighbor left, Marcus and I were alone again, surrounded by enough food to feed an army. The house felt different now, warmer somehow, filled with the tangible evidence of community love. I didn't realize, Marcus said slowly, how much life you managed to maintain for him. I pictured you just existing here, watching him decline. But you gave him dignity, community, joy, where you could find it. That's what love looks like, I replied. It's not grand gestures or dramatic sacrifices. It's showing up every day, especially on the hard days. Teach me, he said suddenly. Teach you what? How to show up. How to be the brother you deserve, even though I'm 2 years too late. There was an earnestness in his voice that made me relent. Okay, but fair warning. It's not glamorous. Today I have to return the hospital bed, drop off unused medications, cancel the meal delivery service, and meet with the hospice nurse for final paperwork. I'm ready, he said, with the determination of someone facing a marathon they hadn't trained for. Our first stop was the medical supply company. Marcus insisted on driving, saying he needed to relearn the town's layout. As we navigated the familiar streets, I pointed out changes. The new playground where the old gas station used to be. The cafe that had replaced our childhood ice cream shop. When did Morrison's Hardware close? He asked, noting the empty storefront. 3 years ago. Mr. Morrison retired and his kids didn't want to take over. Dad was devastated. He loved that place. At the medical supply store, we were greeted by Janet, who had been incredibly helpful throughout Dad's illness. Her face softened when she saw me. Rachel, honey, I'm so sorry about your father. He was such a gentleman, even at the end. Thank you, Janet. This is my brother Marcus. She shook his hand politely, but I caught the flash of recognition in her eyes. Small towns have long memories, and news of yesterday's funeral drama had clearly made the rounds. As we handled the paperwork for returning the equipment, Janet shared a story I hadn't heard before. About a month ago, your dad was having one of his clearer moments when I delivered his oxygen supplies. He asked me to wait, then shuffled to his desk and pulled out 2 envelopes. For my kids, he said. Make sure they get these after I'm gone, but not at the funeral. Too many people. She disappeared into the back room and returned with 2 sealed envelopes, our names written in Dad's shaky handwriting. Marcus and I exchanged glances. "Should we?" he started. "Not here," I decided. "Let's finish our errands first." The next several hours were a parade of bittersweet encounters. At the pharmacy, Dr. Peterson shared how Dad would quiz him about new Alzheimer's research, always hoping for breakthroughs. The meal service coordinator teared up, remembering how Dad insisted on trying to tip the delivery drivers even when he could barely remember his own name. But it was our visit to the hospice office that proved most illuminating for Marcus. Sarah, Dad's primary hospice nurse, greeted us warmly and invited us into her office. "I've been hoping to see you both," she said, pulling out a thick file. "Your father was one of my favorite patients, not just because of his grace in facing his illness, but because of the love surrounding him." She looked directly at Marcus. "He talked about you often." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "I'm sure he mentioned I wasn't around much." "Actually," Sarah said gently, "he spent most of his time defending you. He'd say, 'My boy's building something important in Chicago. Can't expect him to drop everything for an old man's troubles.'" "But I should have," Marcus insisted. "Maybe," Sarah acknowledged. "But what struck me was how fiercely protective he was of both his children's choices. Rachel's choice to stay, your choice to pursue your career. He saw them as equally valid expressions of love." She turned to me. "And you, Rachel, in my 20 years of hospice work, I've rarely seen such dedicated care. But I need to ask, now that your father's gone, what's your plan for yourself?" The question caught me off guard. I haven't really thought about it." "You should," Sarah said firmly. "Caregivers often struggle with identity and purpose after their loved one passes. You've poured yourself into your father's care for 2 years. Now it's time to rediscover who Rachel is outside of that role." Marcus reached over and squeezed my hand, the first voluntary physical contact we'd had in years. After leaving the hospice office, we stopped for lunch at Marino's Deli, another Dad favorite. The owner, Tony Marino, wouldn't let us pay. "Your father hired me for my first teaching job," he explained. 35 years ago, when nobody else would give an ex-con a chance. He changed my life's trajectory. As we ate our sandwiches, Marcus shook his head in wonder. "I had no idea Dad touched so many lives. Every person we've met today has a story about him." "That's who he was," I said. "Even with Alzheimer's, even when he couldn't remember their names, he still made people feel seen and valued. The disease took his memory, but not his kindness." "Unlike me yesterday," Marcus said ruefully. "I showed his worst qualities, quick to judge, slow to listen." "You showed his temper too," I added with a slight smile. "Remember how he'd get when he thought someone was being treated unfairly? That righteous indignation? That was all Dad, just misdirected." We finished our errands by mid-afternoon and found ourselves back at the house, sitting on the back porch despite the cold, both envelopes still unopened on the table between us. "Together?" Marcus suggested, picking up his envelope. I nodded, taking mine. Together. We opened them simultaneously. Inside each was a handwritten letter and a small key. My letter read, "My dearest Rachel, if you're reading this, then our journey together has ended, though I suspect I've been gone longer than my body's departure. Thank you for walking the long goodbye with me. You gave me the gift of dying with dignity in the place I loved most. I know the sacrifices you made. I know about the job offer from Johns Hopkins you turned down. Yes, Harold told me. I know about the relationships that couldn't survive the demands of caregiving. I know about the dreams deferred. But here's what I need you to know. You didn't lose 2 years of your life taking care of me. You gained a depth of character that will serve you the rest of your days. You learned that love isn't just a feeling. It's 1,000 small choices to show up when it's hard. Now it's time for you to choose yourself. The key enclosed opens a safety deposit box at First National. Inside, you'll find your grandmother's jewelry, which your mother wanted you to have, some savings bonds, and a letter of recommendation I wrote before my diagnosis. Use it. Apply to Hopkins again, or wherever your dreams take you. Live fully, my daughter. Your caregiving season is over. Your living season begins now. All my love, Dad. I was crying too hard to read Marcus's letter, but I saw him wiping his eyes as he folded it carefully. He knew, Marcus whispered. He knew everything. What did yours say? I asked when I could speak again. That he forgives me. That he understands why I stayed away. That fear doesn't make me a bad son, just a human one. He paused, swallowing hard. And that the key opens a storage unit where he kept things from our childhood, things he wanted me to share with my future children. Because, quote, even absent fathers can become present grandfathers. We sat in silence, absorbing Dad's final wisdom. Even in death, he was teaching us, guiding us toward healing. The safety deposit box, I said eventually. We should go. Tomorrow. And the storage unit, Marcus agreed. Then, hesitantly, Rachel, what Sarah said about rediscovering yourself. What do you want? If you could do anything now, what would it be? It was a question I'd been afraid to ask myself. Honestly, I want to finish my nurse practitioner degree, maybe specialize in geriatric care. These 2 years taught me so much about elder care, palliative support, family dynamics. I want to use that knowledge to help others. Johns Hopkins? He asked. Maybe. Or somewhere entirely new. I've been in this town my whole life. Maybe it's time to explore. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. You know, my firm has offices in Boston, Seattle, Denver. If you wanted to relocate somewhere, you wouldn't be alone. I meant what I said about moving back here, but maybe we both need fresh starts. The idea felt both terrifying and liberating. Let's see what's in the safety deposit box first, I decided. One step at a time. That evening, as we sorted through sympathy cards and organized funeral paperwork, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Angela, Marcus's ex-fiancée from Chicago, standing on the porch with a suitcase. Angela? Marcus appeared behind me, clearly shocked. What are you doing here? I saw the obituary, she said, her perfectly manicured appearance somewhat disheveled from travel. And then I couldn't reach you. Your office said you'd resigned? Marcus, what's going on? I stepped back, letting them have their moment. This was a complication neither of us had anticipated. I'm sorry, Marcus said gently but firmly. I should have called. Dad's death made me realize I need to make some major life changes, including being honest about us. He loved us so much, I whispered. He did, and he understood us better than we understood ourselves. Marcus took the journal, flipping to a specific page. Listen to this. Marcus needs to fail spectacularly before he'll succeed authentically. Rachel needs to choose herself before she can fully choose others. My job is to love them through both journeys. I leaned against my brother's shoulder. He really saw us. Yeah, even when we couldn't see ourselves. The next morning, before I returned to Boston, we visited Dad's grave together. The bulbs we'd planted had bloomed, bright yellow daffodils dancing in the spring breeze. Marcus had brought something unexpected. His first month's salary from his new position at a local investment firm that specialized in socially responsible portfolios. I'm donating it to the Alzheimer's Association, he explained. It feels right, using my fresh start to help others facing what we faced. As we stood there, a familiar figure approached. Angela. She looked different, less polished, more human. I hope it's okay that I'm here, she said hesitantly. I wanted to pay my respects and to apologize. Marcus and I exchanged glances. Of course, I said, surprising myself. I was awful at the funeral, Angela continued. Grief makes people crazy, and I was jealous of how close you two had become through your dad's illness. It highlighted everything that was shallow about my relationship with Marcus. We all have regrets, Marcus offered gently. I've been seeing a therapist, Angela shared, working on understanding why I valued image over substance for so long. Your family's journey, it's made me reconsider everything. After she left, Marcus turned to me. A year ago, I would have gloated over her apology. Now I just feel compassion. Character development, I teased. Dad would be proud. Back in Boston, energized by the weekend's revelations, I threw myself into my studies with renewed purpose. My thesis project took shape, developing a family-centered care model for Alzheimer's patients that addressed not just the medical needs, but the emotional and relational dynamics of the entire family system. My advisor, Dr. Patricia Chen, was intrigued. This is groundbreaking work, Rachel. Your personal experience gives it authenticity that pure research can't replicate. 3 months later, I presented my preliminary findings at a regional conference. In the audience, to my surprise, sat Marcus, Elena, Harold, and several people from our hometown. What are you all doing here? I asked afterward, overwhelmed. Supporting family, Marcus said simply. Isn't that what we do? My presentation had caught the attention of Dr. Grace Whitmore, the psychiatrist who'd written the letter and donated to Dad's scholarship fund. She approached me after the session. Your father would be incredibly proud, she said. Your model addresses exactly what's missing in most Alzheimer's care, the recognition that the disease affects entire family systems, not just patients. We talked for an hour about Dad, about the ripple effects of kindness, about how trauma and healing often travel together through families. By the end of our conversation, she'd offered to collaborate on expanding my research. I can't believe Dad's still opening doors for us, I told Marcus later. Not just opening them, he replied, showing us they were there all along. The following year flew by. I completed my degree, published 2 papers with Dr. Whitmore, and accepted a position at an innovative memory care center in Portland, Oregon, far enough to be my own adventure, close enough to stay connected. Marcus and Elena got engaged. She asked me to be her maid of honor, saying, "You're not just going to be my sister-in-law, you're already my sister." The wedding was small, held in Marcus's backyard on a perfect September day. As I gave my toast, I looked out at the gathered friends and family, many of the same people who'd witnessed our public fracture at Dad's funeral 2 years earlier. Someone wise once told me, I began, glancing at Harold, that people aren't lost, they're just taking different routes to the same destination. Marcus and I took the long way around to finding each other again. But maybe that's what we needed, to lose our way completely before we could chart a new course together. I raised my glass. To Marcus and Elena, who proved that love isn't just about finding the right person. It's about becoming the right person. And to Dad, who knew that the best inheritance isn't money or property. It's the capacity to love, to forgive, and to show up for each other. 6 months after the wedding, I got the call every adult child dreads. Mrs. Patterson, our former neighbor, had found Marcus collapsed in his driveway. Heart attack. He was in surgery. I flew back immediately, those terrible hours in the waiting room bringing back visceral memories of Dad's final days. But this time I wasn't alone. Elena was there. Harold, the entire community that Marcus had rebuilt relationships with. When the surgeon finally emerged, his news was good. Marcus would recover fully. He's lucky, the doctor said. His commitment? to lifestyle changes over the past 2 years. The weight loss, stress reduction, community involvement probably saved his life. In his hospital room later, Marcus was groggy but coherent. "Guess I needed a dramatic reminder about what matters," he croaked. "You Morrison men and your dramatic gestures," I replied, holding his hand. "I had this moment," he continued, "when I thought I might die. And you know what I regretted? Not the deals I didn't close or the promotions I didn't get. I regretted every moment I hadn't spent with family." "Well," I said, "good news is you get more moments. Try not to waste them." His recovery became another opportunity for growth. I took a leave from work to help Elena care for him, a role reversal that felt deeply symbolic. As I watched my brother learn to accept help, to be vulnerable, to let others serve him, I saw echoes of Dad's journey. One evening, as I helped him with his physical therapy exercises, Marcus said, "I used to think strength meant never needing anyone. Now I know it means having people you can count on, and being someone others can count on in return." "Dad taught us that," I reminded him. "No," Marcus corrected. "Dad taught you that. You taught me." A year later, at the 5th anniversary memorial of Dad's passing, we unveiled a new addition to the scholarship fund, the Morrison Center for Family-Centered Dementia Care, funded by grants I'd helped secure and a significant donation from Dr. Whitmore. The center, housed in the renovated community center, would provide support groups, respite care, and education for families navigating Alzheimer's and other dementias. Marcus had spearheaded the project during his recovery, channeling his business acumen into something meaningful. At the dedication ceremony, I stood at the podium where Marcus had once publicly accused me of negligence. The same room, the same faces, but everything transformed. 5 years ago, I began. Our family's private pain became public spectacle in this very room. It was the worst day of my life, and the beginning of the best chapter. Because sometimes things need to break completely before they can be rebuilt stronger. I looked at Marcus, now healthy and sitting with Elena and their 6-month-old daughter, named Roberta, after Dad. Our father's illness took his memories, but revealed his character. It stripped away our pretenses and showed us who we really were and who we could become. This center is his legacy, but it's also ours. Proof that pain can be transformed into purpose, that isolation can become connection, that the very experiences that threaten to tear families apart can ultimately bring them together. After the ceremony, as people mingled and shared their own stories of loss and redemption, Harold approached me with tears in his eyes. "Your father asked me once what he could leave his children that truly mattered," he said. "I think he figured it out." That night, Marcus and I sat on his porch swing, baby Roberta sleeping in his arms. The spring air was sweet with the scent of blooming gardens, beauty rising from the earth that had once seemed so barren. "You know what I think?" Marcus said quietly. "I think Dad knew exactly what he was doing. Even with Alzheimer's, even in his confusion, he orchestrated all of this somehow. The ultimate principle," I agreed, still educating his children from beyond the grave. "Hey, Rach?" Marcus looked at me with an expression I recognized, the same one he'd worn as a child when about to share a secret or ask an important question. I studied his face, searching for signs of the dismissive attitude I'd grown used to. Instead, I found genuine remorse and determination. "It starts with listening," I said finally. "Really listening, not just waiting for your turn to talk or offer solutions." "I'm listening now." So I began to tell him everything, not just the hardships, but the moments of grace too. How Dad, even in his confusion, would sometimes pat my hand and say, "Good girl," like when I was little. How he'd insisted on wearing his best tie to doctor appointments because professionals respect professionals. How, on his last lucid day, he'd told me I reminded him of Mom in all the best ways. Marcus listened without interrupting, tears sliding silently down his cheeks. When I finished, he asked, "What was the hardest part?" "The day he forgot my name," I answered without hesitation. He kept calling me the nice lady and asking when his daughter would visit. I had to excuse myself to cry in the bathroom, then come back with a smile and pretend everything was fine. "And you did that alone." "I did everything alone, Marcus. The good days and bad days, the small victories and devastating losses. When he took his last breath, I was the only family there." "I should have been there," he whispered. "Yes, you should have. But you weren't, and we can't change that now." We sat in contemplative silence until Marcus suddenly stood up. "Wait here," he said, heading toward the door. "Where are you?" To my rental car. I brought something. I wasn't sure if I'd have the courage to give it to you." He returned with a large box, which he set on the coffee table between us. Inside were hundreds of cards and letters, all addressed to Dad but never sent. "I wrote to him almost every week," Marcus explained, his voice thick with emotion. "I just could never mail them. I thought maybe someday I'd read them to him in person, catch him up on everything. But I kept putting off that visit." I picked up one letter at random, dated 18 months ago. "Dear Dad, I got promoted to senior partner today. My first thought was to call you, to hear you say you're proud of me. But I'm afraid if I call, Rachel will tell me you've gotten worse, that you might not even remember who I am. I'm a coward, Dad. I'm so sorry. Love, Marcus." "He would have loved these," I said softly. "Even if he couldn't understand them fully, hearing your voice reading them would have meant everything." "I know," Marcus said miserably. "That's why I brought them. I thought maybe we could read them at his grave sometime. Together." It was the first suggestion he'd made that acknowledged a future where we might heal, where we might find our way back to being siblings again. "I'd like that," I admitted. The evening deepened into night, and we found ourselves going through photo albums, sharing memories, and slowly bridging the chasm between us. Marcus told me about his life in Chicago, the loneliness behind his success, the failed relationships, the therapy he'd started after Dad's diagnosis. "I've been running from grief my whole adult life," he confessed. "After Mom died, I threw myself into school, then work. I thought if I stayed busy enough, achieved enough, I could outrun the pain. But it just left me empty. And now? Now I realize that by avoiding the pain, I also missed out on the love. The last 2 years of Dad's life, yes, they were hard, but they were still his life. I missed sharing that with both of you." Around midnight, exhaustion finally caught up with us. As Marcus prepared to leave for his hotel, he paused at the door. "I'm staying for 2 weeks," he announced. "I already called my office. I want to help with everything. The house, the legal matters, whatever you need." 2 weeks isn't going to fix 2 years, I warned. "No, but it's a start. And after that, I'll come back every month. I'll call every week. I'll show up, Rachel. I promise." Looking at my brother, really looking at him for the first time in years, I saw not the successful stranger he'd become, but glimpses of the boy who'd once been my best friend and protector. "Okay," I said simply. As he walked to his car, I called out, "Marcus?" He turned back. "Yeah?" "Dad never stopped being proud of you. Even on his worst days, when he saw your picture, he'd smile and say, 'That's my boy, the smart one.' He loved you. He just missed you." Marcus nodded, unable to speak, and drove away into the night. I went back inside Dad's house, my house, now, and sat in his favorite chair. The silence felt different, less empty somehow. For the first time since Dad's death, I allowed myself to truly cry. Not just for losing him, but for all the complicated love and loss tangled up in our family story. On the coffee table, Marcus's box of unsent letters sat like a metaphor for all our missed connections. But tomorrow, we'd start reading them together, building new bridges over old regrets. It wouldn't be easy or quick, but nothing worthwhile ever is. As I turned off the lights and headed upstairs, I thought about what Harold had said about showing up. Marcus had finally shown up today, not just physically, but emotionally. He'd faced his failures, acknowledged his mistakes, and asked for a chance to do better. In my bedroom, I found an envelope on my pillow that hadn't been there this morning. Inside was a handwritten note from Marcus. Rachel, I know I said I'd call my office tomorrow, but I already resigned. Chicago was never home. It was just a place to hide. I'm moving back, not just for 2 weeks, but for good. You shouldn't have to sort through Dad's life alone, and more importantly, I don't want to miss any more of your life. I've already missed too much. I found a rental apartment downtown, and I start at the regional office next month. It's a demotion, but I'm okay with that. Some things matter more than titles. Thank you for keeping the porch light on, even when you had every reason to lock me out. Your brother, who's trying to earn that title back, Marcus. I sat on the edge of my bed, rereading the note several times. Outside, snow began to fall, blanketing the world in fresh white. It felt symbolic somehow, a clean slate, a new beginning. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. I know it's late, but I'm at the 24-hour diner. Want to grab coffee and pie? Like old times? I smiled, remembering our teenage nights at that same diner, sharing fries and dreams. Without hesitation, I grabbed my coat and keys. Some invitations, like some apologies, deserve immediate acceptance. As I drove through the snowy streets, I thought about forgiveness. How it's not a single moment, but a series of choices. Today, at Dad's funeral, our family had fractured publicly. But in the quiet hours that followed, we'd begun the delicate work of healing. The diner's neon sign glowed warmly through the snow. Inside, I could see Marcus at our old booth, 2 cups of coffee already waiting. He looked up as I approached, and for the first time in years, I saw my brother. Not the stranger he'd become, but the person he was choosing to be again. Hey, sis, he said as I slid into the booth. Hey yourself, I replied, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. And there, in that familiar booth with snow falling outside and the jukebox playing Dad's favorite Sinatra songs, we began the long journey home to each other. The next morning arrived with a peculiar sense of possibility. I woke up in Dad's house to find Marcus already in the kitchen, fumbling with the coffee maker. He was wearing yesterday's funeral suit pants and one of Dad's old college sweatshirts he must have found in the laundry room. I remember this thing being easier to operate, he muttered, staring at the machine like it was some complex puzzle. That's because Dad replaced it 6 months ago, I said, reaching past him to press the right combination of buttons. The old one finally gave out after 20 years. 20 years, Marcus repeated softly. I missed even the coffee maker's retirement party. It was such an absurd statement that we both started laughing, the kind of punch-drunk laughter that comes from emotional exhaustion and new beginnings. It felt good to laugh with my brother again, even over something so mundane. As we waited for the coffee to brew, Marcus pulled out his phone. I've been thinking, he said, scrolling through his calendar. I need to learn everything, not just about Dad's final arrangements, but about what these 2 years were really like. Would you be willing to let me shadow you for a few days? See your routines, meet the people who helped? I raised an eyebrow. Shadow me? Marcus, Dad's gone. There aren't any routines anymore. I know, but I want to understand what your life has been like. Plus, we need to return medical equipment, cancel services, notify people. Let me help with all of it.